Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. On the program today, U.S. President Donald Trump's travel ban to 12 countries and visa restriction to 7 more has citizens of those countries asking, what does this mean? Others are measuring their responses. After all, they're still discussing with the United States over trade tariffs, and this would only further escalate tensions. And then there are others watching from the sidelines thinking, should we respond? I have two great guests discussing the questions and trying to understand President Donald Trump's actions. Legal expert Anthony Ogunfebo is in Brazil, while public affairs analyst PoliticsToday joins us from Abuja, Nigeria's Federal Capital Territory. That's Diplomatic Channel in a wrap. Let's check in on those other developments in the world of diplomacy, and we'll be right back.
The Nigerian government has extended her deepest condolences to the government and people of the Republic of Zambia on the passing of its former president, Edgar Lungu, who died on June 5 at the age of 68. A statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs says the late Mr. Lungu's leadership saw to the appointment of the country's first female president and other initiatives to promote inclusivity, national unity, and economic diversification, among others. It says Nigeria acknowledged the late President Lungu's contributions to strengthening Africa's collective voice on the global stage and his commitments to regional solidarity. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs says its attention has been drawn to a fake Facebook account purportedly created in the name of the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry, Ambassador Dunoma Umar. A statement by the ministry says the Permanent Secretary does not operate or own any social media account. It says it is collaborating with relevant security agencies and Meta to investigate and shut down the fake account. Iran's intelligence minister Ismail Khatib claims Tehran had obtained a significant collection of sensitive documents including details of Israel's nuclear plans and facilities and vowed to release them soon. The Israeli government has not commented on the claims. Last month, Israel's internal security agency, Shin Bet, and police announced the arrest of two 24-year-old individuals from northern Israel on charges of collaborating with Iran.
Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday announced a travel ban for citizens from 12 countries and visa restrictions on 7 more. It comes into effect on June 9. He says the ban and restrictions apply to countries that don't have things under control. The countries affected by the ban are Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. And those with visa restrictions are Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. Trump says the countries subject to the most severe restrictions were determined to harbor a large-scale presence of terrorists, fail to cooperate on visa security, have an inability to verify travelers' identities, as well as inadequate record keeping of criminal histories and high rates of visa overstays in the United States. The U.S. president cited the previous Sunday's incident in Boulder, Colorado, in which an Egyptian national tossed a gasoline bomb into a crowd of pro-Israel demonstrators as an example of why the new curbs are needed. But Egypt is not on the travel ban.
We will not let what happened in Europe happen to America. That's why on my first day back in office, I directed the Secretary of State to perform a security review of high-risk regions and make recommendations for where restrictions should be imposed. Among the national security threats their analysis considered are the large-scale presence of terrorists, failure to cooperate on visa security, inability to verify travelers' identities, inadequate record-keeping of criminal histories, and persistently high rates of illegal visa overstays and other things. Very simply, we cannot have open migration from any country where we cannot safely and reliably vet and screen those who seek to enter the United States. That is why today I am signing a new executive order placing travel restrictions on countries including Yemen, Somalia, Haiti, Libya, and numerous others. The strength of the restrictions we're applying depends on the severity of the threat posed. The list is subject to revision based on whether material improvements are made, and likewise, new countries can be added as threats emerge around the world. But we will not allow people to enter our country who wish to do us harm, and nothing will stop us from keeping America safe. Thank you very much.
Reactions began trailing the travel ban. Somalis denounced it as defamation and discrimination. Some had hopes of traveling to the United States for higher education, but a lot of Somalis expressed willingness to work with the U.S. to address any security issues. Chad says it will suspend issuing visas to U.S. citizens in accordance with the principles of reciprocity. President Idris Deby Itno said on Facebook, Chad has no plans to offer, has no planes to offer, no billions of dollars to give, but Chad has his dignity and pride, referring, of course, to the $400 million luxury plane offered to President Donald Trump as a gift by Qatar. The African Union criticized the ban, saying it represents a setback for African-U.S. relations and that the restrictions could have damaging effects, particularly in the areas of education, commerce, and diplomacy. Outside of Africa, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, whose country is not on the list but is affected by U.S. immigration policies, says Venezuelan migrants in the U.S. are good people. He wants the U.S. to stop the smear campaigns and lies in order to deport legitimate Venezuelans from staying in the United States. Let's bring in now Mr. Anthony Ogunfebo. He's a legal practitioner currently right now in Rio de Janeiro and public affairs analyst at PoliticsToday, who's in Abuja, Nigeria's federal capital territory. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Amaraki. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to begin with your initial thoughts on the ban and the visa restrictions. Mr. Ogunfebo, let's start with you.
Yes, thank you very much, Amaraki. Well, can I just say right from the outset, that straight off the bat, that with the Trump presidency, it now appears that the key point to bear in mind is to expect the unexpected. The appearance that is being given here by the visa ban is that it's rife with so many inconsistencies and also lacks clarity. And as a result of that, lots of other countries, particularly the African countries that you mentioned, Chad, Sudan, and countries on the ban list, are basically up in arms because they believe that there's this sentiment that they're being unfairly treated and bullied by superpower. And many experts have also said that that's the general feeling among the nationals or among the citizens of these countries that have been placed on the banned list. And the second point I will make in that regard, on that issue, is that there's also this impression that I get, and I've also read on social media, that the relationships and bridges that have been built over the years by the US with other countries, other trading partners, and so on and so forth, that these bridges are at the risk of being burned, and that damage could very well take years to repair. And again, that's the general sentiment that is being shared by so many experts around the world. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chude, do you agree? But you, of course, you were not surprised having monitored America's relations with many of these countries, and you're not as you're not a novice, I think, of America's immigration system. Were you surprised by this announcement by President Trump?
No, I'm not surprised. In fact, people who have been watching Trump years before he got into his incursion into politics will realize, if you go back to videos that as far back as 20 years, 25 years, some of the things that Trump is doing are things that have been in the public space for a very, very long time. So from that perspective, he has been very, very consistent. If you look at what the geopolitics that's going on around Europe, the issue with NATO and with NATO, the North African, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, are things that he has talked about. Issue of trying to get NATO to pay their fair share in terms of a contribution. I mean, NATO countries, in terms of contribution to the NATO cost. These are things he's talked about. So at the level of immigration, there is really nothing new about what he's doing. If we remember in 2017, he also came up with this travel ban that also received much criticism from a lot of people. How effective the travel bans have been is a different ballgame, because people are saying that it's not exactly achieving what they are, intended to achieve. And the reality is that Trump is a disruptor. Whether in terms of American politics or in terms of geopolitics also. And so he's been pretty consistent in what he's been trying to do. And obviously, a lot of countries, I agree that, yes, a lot of bridges have been burnt. But again, it also shows the power of the United States, the reach and the influence of the United States, because during the tariff battles, for instance, I think the Chinese government wanted to mobilize a lot of other countries against against the United States, to forge a common front. But they were not exactly able to build that coalition that was needed. And you saw a lot of countries adhering to Trump's advice for them not to retaliate, and then it will be easier for them, the tariff regime will be easier for them and the rest. And then they now began to talk even with the Chinese government too on the issue of the tariffs. So this situation, like I said, is not exactly new. Of course, there are two categories of this: those with a total ban, and then those that have restrictions. And like you said, until some of these countries are able to get their acts right. I don't know exactly what rights, acts is talking about. Some of these countries are violent prone, we know. But if you look deep down again, there are people that will tell you that some of the strife that is going on in parts of the world, that, back in history, back in time, that the United States also had a hand in some of these things. So it's a bit of a contradiction, really. So different countries, different, scenarios. But I think perhaps the Somali scenario might be better. Somali says that it's going to work closely with the United States to see how they can smoothen the gap or the problems that brought about this ban on Somalians traveling to the United States. So ultimately, I think some of these countries also have to look inwards to see exactly what needs to be done.
Yes, and this announcement that the U.S. president made, he made after that attack on a pro-Israeli group in Colorado, who were having, I think, a meeting, and then this white man came and was throwing gasoline and Molotov cocktails on them. A clear attack. The person who was involved, they eventually found out what was someone of Egyptian heritage. It was an Egyptian, and but Egypt is not on the list. From what I see from the 12 countries and the 7 countries with the visa restrictions, Egypt is nowhere on the list. He cites terrorism activities in the U.S. as one of the reasons, why this ban and the restrictions have taken place. We're not saying, that, the president cannot make this announcement, but what is wrong really about the announcement, which can be challenged?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's okay.
Please carry on.
Go on,
Okay, thank you.
Anthony.
Yeah. When it's about national interest, and I think my colleague on the other side, Faraway Brazil, talked about it. That countries, in terms of international relations, that what governs the actions and the activities and philosophies of government is about national interest. So it is about how they define what constitutes national, interest. And so you talked about the contradiction, for instance, of an Egyptian being involved in an act of terrorism in the United States in the state of Colorado. And the fact that you wonder that, I think that's why you mentioned it, why Egypt is not, on that list. The reality is that American interest, has an interest in Egypt that has been long in the making. America needs Egyptian influence to be able to get a lot of things done, especially with regards to the happenings in Gaza and their relationship with Egypt. Of course, you know how inexorably linked America is with Israel, the state of Israel. Every government, regardless of the political party, they have these historical ties to Israel, and that's why sometimes, even when it is being said by the rest of the world that America is acting in ways that are diametrically opposed to international conventions, for instance, America does not really care, and so Egypt is a strong factor in whatever evolves in the Middle East, and that's why America will not want to put Egypt there. Of course, it's a bit discriminatory, the travel ban. When you look at it deep down, you will see a bit of a contradictions here and there. But of course, all of these things are being done or not being done essentially because of the definition, how America defines strategic national interest. It's not about morality. People will tell you that there is no morality in international, politics, and so that's what we're seeing play out.
We're off on a short break now on the program. When we return, we'll return to the concluding part of my conversation with Anthony Ogunfebo and Achike Chude on Trump's travel ban and visa restrictions. I'm just wondering, if it was just really easy to impose a travel ban on these countries, not necessarily because of the state in which they're in, but because of what, America could gain from any of them. Not sure exactly what America's relations with any of these countries are, and they don't feature on the priority list of any governments in Europe or even in the US. It just seems kind of a low-hanging fruit, I would say, for the Trump administration to be doing this.
Interesting. Yeah, well, you just established, the common thread, more or less, among these countries that you have talked about. Well, again, part of it is that a lot of them are embroiled in a crisis, one crisis or the other. And just like Anthony said, when he was talking about Egypt, there is a central government in place. But for most of the countries, especially from Africa, that are involved or included in this travel ban, you will see in a gradual erosion of the disappearance of the state, where your states are weak, institutions of state are also very weak. So that's the thread that the commonality of the thread that you established. And again, one other thing you established is the fact that they are not exactly of a significance to the United States. Let's take a country like China. America has had issues with China for a very, very long time. There's the issue of the so-called, the reports one is getting, we don't know which is propaganda or not, of the prosecution of the Uyghurs, in part of China. And then, of course, we also remember a few years ago, the very serious crackdown, in Hong Kong that took place. What position did America actually take against China? Of course, America did not, because China is very, very important to the United States as a trading partner, so you realize that the bigger you are, the more influential you are, the less the ability of the desire for the United States to engage in a negative, hostile actions against you, because they have an interest to also protect. And so this is the thing that runs around, this thing that's going on.
Very good. I'm sorry, if I can just quickly come in here. I believe a point also has to be made in the case of Chad, or in the case of 3 African countries, namely Chad, Congo Brazzaville, and Equatorial Guinea. Now, the reason given for the visa ban on those countries is that they have high visa overstaying rates. In other words, the nationals who travel to America on visas do not, they overstay the 3-month leave, or they overstay the period of leave, And as a result of that, they cannot be trusted. But some experts, in fact, this is what some officials of the Chadian government have said, that that is not exactly the case. And this brings up the issue of the lack of clarity. As far as the Chadian government is concerned, in the first place, there's not much a sovereign government can do to ensure that its citizens do not overstay their visa in another country. That's the first thing. The second part is that I don't know if you recall that sometime last year, I think it was May 2024, the president of Chad, Ibn Deby, actually asked American troops to leave Chad, American troops stationed on French bases in Chad. He told them to leave, and they have left. So what the Chadian authorities are saying is that, listen, the reason why America has imposed that travel ban, also that visa ban, it's not because of the reasons given, the official reasons given for high visa overstay rates, but it's a tit for tat for the demand for American troops to leave Chad. And it so happens that the Chadian government has now decided to retaliate and impose visa bans on American nationals wanting to travel to Chad. But I suppose in terms of numbers, I think there's likely to be some sort of imbalance there. But again, this is just to provide some sort of context to this back and forth between Chad and the U.S. government. That effectively, what the Chadian government is saying is that there is more to this than meets the eye. Thank you.
Remember that Trump says that more countries could also be added to the list. So this is not a final list. Do you want to start us off on what we can learn from this?
Let me put it this way. If in your house, your children and those living in your house find it very fanciful and interesting to go to their neighbor's house on a continuous basis, and then you don't have that kind of reciprocity from, the children of your neighbors coming to your house, then it means that there's something, worthwhile. There's something interesting in the neighbor's house. So we this constant, immigration, this constant movement by Africans, and all over the world, everybody, their destination is Europe, America, and all that. And you're not just talking about Africans, you're talking about Latin Americans, you're talking about people from parts of Asia and then Eastern Europe. Everybody's moving to those places. Why are they moving? It simply means that there is something that is not working in their home countries. Simply means, again, and that is an indictment really on the political leadership and the institutions in those places, that they are not able to cater for the welfare of their people. It would appear that there's just so much that they can't seem to take to stomach, and that's why they keep on going. So we need to get it right. And lastly, let me just say this. The African youthful population, we are told that in the next maybe 20, 25 years, the global population in the world will be about 25% of the youthful population in the world will come from Africa. And so the saying is that if we can get it right politically in the African continent, Africa will dominate the world. That's what we should be thinking of doing.
Thank you. Anthony, any lessons?
Chike, I entirely agree with that. And you've basically spoken to my heart, because, you see, I'm a firm believer in this saying that every cloud always has a silver lining, and that problems usually come with opportunities. For me, this visa ban is actually a wake-up call for African countries to strengthen multilateral trade and diplomatic links with themselves, to strengthen intra-African trade. I remember last year there was this fanfare about the African Continental Free Trade, is it AFTA, Africa Continental Free Trade Area? And I think now is the time for African countries to give priority to that concept and begin to build more trade, more links between them. Say for example, let's talk about intra-African travel. Apparently, it's a lot more expensive for a Nigerian maybe to travel to a country like Burundi than or easier to travel to London than travel to Burundi, which is half the distance. In fact, less than half the distance. I think that's ridiculous. So I think this sort of thing is, you really should make African countries, sit up and say, look, for how long are we not going to take our destinies in our hands and be masters of our destiny rather than being pushed around by all these great or the superpowers, or having visa bans imposed on our citizens and being treated like second-class citizens. I believe that the after treaty should be implemented ASAP, and that there should be regular seminars, regular conventions, regular meetings, symposium, to make sure that this treaty becomes a reality and that intra-Africa trade grows. In fact, we can even, once the AFTA treaty is implemented and gets up and running, we can then start doing this continental trade agreements between AFTA and China, that sort of thing. Africa really needs to take its destiny in its hands. And I think this visa ban is a wake-up call and an opportunity for them to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony Ogunfebo and Achike Chude. You have both been wonderful. Thank you for addressing the issues and, of course, your thoughts and your opinions and analysis on the Trump travel ban and the visa restrictions. Thanks for joining us on Diplomatic Channel.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
That's Diplomatic Channel this week. Thanks for watching. I look forward to your comments, especially those under the comment section on YouTube. You can also reach me using any of the addresses showing on your screen. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.